She was pronounced dead by medical personnel. But just minutes before her funeral, something happened that no one could believe. This is the heartbreaking and miraculous story of a young woman who came back from the brink of death, and her mother, who never gave up on her. Sit back and enjoy this story. After listening to it all the way through, share your thoughts about the story with us in the comments. The sun began to shine into Isabel's small room, casting a soft light on the walls covered with music posters and sheet music scattered on the table. For anyone else, it would have been just another normal day, but for Isabel, something was terribly wrong. She woke up feeling strange and tried to stretch, but her body wouldn't respond. Panic began to grow. It must be sleep paralysis, she thought, trying to calm herself. It will pass. It always does. On the other side of the door, Maria, her mother, called out, "Isabel, it's already 9 o'clock. You're going to be late." Isabel heard everything, every word, clear as crystal, but she couldn't even move her lips to respond. Despair took hold of her. She tried to scream, to cry, anything. "Why can't I move?" Maria rushed into the room, annoyed by her daughter's silence. "Isabel, are you still asleep?" she said, as she pulled back the blanket. But when she saw her daughter unresponsive, something in her heart tightened. Bella touched her daughter's arm with more force than usual. "Wake up, daughter. Please answer me." Nothing. No movement. Maria felt a knot in her stomach. This was not the deep sleep that a 21-year-old would have after a normal day. Something was wrong. "Don't do this to me, Bella. Don't do this to me," she said with a trembling voice as tears began to fall from her eyes. She cupped Isabel's face with both hands, searching for some sign of life, some response. But nothing happened. The silence was deafening. It was then that Maria realized the situation was serious. She ran to the phone and, with trembling hands, dialed the emergency number. "My daughter isn't moving. She isn't talking. I don't know what's happening. Please come quickly," Maria shouted, her voice full of fear. Back in the room, Isabel remained motionless, but inside, everything was chaos. "I'm here. I'm alive. Please, someone hear me." Tears ran down Maria's face as she held her daughter's hand, pleading, "Don't leave me, beautiful. You're all I have." The ambulance siren broke the morning silence like a desperate cry echoing in Maria's heart. She ran to open the door, sobbing, as the paramedics rushed in with their backpacks toward Isabel's room. Isabel, what had once been a home filled with music and laughter, now seemed like a lifeless place with a silence too heavy to bear. The paramedics examined Isabel. One of them placed his hand on the young woman's neck, searching for a pulse. Another placed his stethoscope on her chest. The serious faces of both revealed a truth for which Maria was not prepared. "There are no signs of a heartbeat," said the paramedic in a low voice, almost a whisper, but it was enough to make Maria's world collapse. "No, that can't be true," Maria cried, grabbing the man's arm. "My daughter was fine yesterday. It can't be that she just—" "Ma'am, I'm so sorry," he replied, with a look full of compassion. "It appears to have been sudden cardiac arrest. There was nothing that could be done." Maria stood frozen for a moment, trying to process those words. Cardiac arrest? Isabel was so healthy. How could it happen without warning? She knelt beside her daughter, holding her cold hand. Tears ran down her face as she stroked Isabel's hair, unable to believe what she was seeing in front of her. "You're wrong. My beautiful girl isn't dead. She's here with me," she shouted at the paramedics. No matter how much Maria insisted, the procedure continued. The paramedics noted the official time of death and began to prepare the body to take it away. Before they could do so, Maria threw herself on top of her daughter, hugging her with all her strength. "Daughter, please come back to me. Tell me this is a mistake," she sobbed, her face buried in Isabel's chest. At that moment, Maria felt something, a slight, almost imperceptible warmth in the palm of Isabel's hand. She looked at the paramedics with eyes full of hope. "Wait, she's alive." I felt her warm hand. One of the paramedics approached and touched Isabel's hand. He shook his head. "It's impossible, ma'am. The body can retain heat for a few hours after death. I'm very sorry." But Maria knew something was wrong. She couldn't explain it, but her heart told her that Isabel wasn't really dead. How could she accept that her daughter, full of dreams and life, had left without warning? As the ambulance drove away, carrying Isabel's body to the funeral home, Maria remained kneeling on the floor of the room, screaming to the heavens, "Why, God, why are you taking my daughter?" Deep down, a more urgent question echoed in her mind. What if they're wrong? The sky seemed as gray as Maria's heart. She was still in shock, unable to accept that her daughter was gone. Every detail of that morning seemed surreal, as if she were living a nightmare from which she could not wake up. The family, who had also just received the news, suffered, unable to believe it. They thought that prolonging the wake would be too cruel for Maria, so they decided to do everything quickly. A short wake that same afternoon, followed by the burial. "We can't leave her exposed like this for so long," said one of Isabel's aunts. "It will be more painful for everyone." However, Maria couldn't bear the idea. She didn't want to say goodbye so quickly. She couldn't believe that her little girl, her Bella, was gone so suddenly. "She's still here," Maria murmured to herself, almost like a prayer, while they prepared Isabel's body at the funeral home. Maria wanted to have the opportunity to see her one last time before they placed her in the coffin in the cold room of the funeral home, where she was interrupted only by footsteps and the rustling of papers. Ramon, a retired doctor who now worked preparing bodies, watched Isabel closely. He had prepared dozens, perhaps hundreds of bodies in his career, but something at that moment made him pause. Isabel looked different. Her skin did not have the pale tone typical of death. Her face, although motionless, showed a subtle blush on her cheeks. Ramon hesitated for a moment before continuing with the procedures. He leaned over the body once more and touched her forehead. It was cold, but not as cold as it should have been. "It's strange," he murmured to himself, frowning. He took the death certificate that the paramedics had filled out. Something was wrong. The information was sparse. The tests mentioned were minimal. He found no reference to an electrocardiogram or any real attempt at resuscitation. It was as if they had rushed the process, declaring Isabel dead based on her position. A feeling of unease grew inside him. Ramon knew that technically, it was no longer his responsibility to question medical diagnoses. His job was now to ensure that the body was ready for the wake, but the doubt planted in his mind would not go away. "Ramon, what are you waiting for?" The authoritative voice of Javier, the funeral home owner, interrupted his thoughts. He stood with his arms crossed and a stern look on his face. "We're in a hurry. The family wants the body ready as soon as possible, and they're on their way here." Ramon hesitated. "Javier, there's something strange about this case. The color of her skin and the report don't seem complete." Javier sighed, visibly annoyed. "Listen, Ramon, we're not here to question the doctors or whether they filled out the paperwork correctly. They know what they're doing. Our job is simple. Prepare the body, period." But Ramon couldn't ignore what he was feeling. Something inside him told him he had to act. And if he was wrong, it would cause the family more pain. But what if he was right? What if that young woman still had a chance to live? He decided to buy some time while Javier went to attend to other matters. Ramon remained in the room watching Isabel as if waiting for a sign. He remembered his own daughter, whom he had lost years ago in similar circumstances. Pilares had also been diagnosed with sudden death due to a fall, but Ramon always wondered if something more could have been done. Now, facing Isabel, he felt that same pain revive. He wanted to scream, but he knew no one would hear him. He looked at the papers again and noticed something that made him shudder. The time of death and the arrival of the paramedics at the funeral home did not match. It was as if they had omitted what happened between one moment and the next. Why did the paramedics seem so rushed? Were they trying to hide something? Ramon took a deep breath, but before he could do anything, Javier returned, pressing him. "Ramon, finish what you have to do. The family is waiting." He stood still, holding the tools as he looked at Isabel's serene face. He knew that if he continued with the procedures, he would be burying more than a body. He would be burying his doubts, his conscience, and perhaps even a life that could be saved. The pressure was enormous. Javier was inflexible, and Ramon knew that to face this, he would need a courage he might not have. He would risk his entire job, his reputation, and his peace of mind for a suspicion he didn't even know was true. As the decision weighed on his heart, Ramon looked at Isabel once more and thought, If I don't act now, how many sleepless nights will this cost me? The doubt was overwhelming, but Ramon still did not know that in the next few moments, the truth about Isabel would begin to reveal itself in ways that no one could have foreseen. Until the door opened, and Maria and the young woman's relatives rushed in, crying. The scene seemed to tear every bit of her soul apart. Her daughter, so full of life, now lay there motionless with a serene face that did not reflect the pain she was leaving behind. Maria approached slowly, uncertain of the fact. "My daughter is broken. My beautiful girl," she whispered, taking Isabel's hand. "This is impossible. She's dead. Come back to me." She looked around, but no one seemed to notice. "Please come back to me," she cried, almost imploring. The funeral home employee looked at her uncomfortably, but Maria held Isabel's hand tighter, as if she wanted to transfer her own life to her. "Beautiful, please, daughter. Wake up." The silence was absolute, and around her, people began to murmur. Maria felt alone in her grief, but before she could insist further, the funeral director said it was time to take the body to the wake. The scene seemed to tear what was left of Maria's heart. She looked at Isabel, trying to memorize every detail, as if there was still something she could do to change that cruel fate. At the wake, friends and family arrived to offer their condolences. Maria could not take her eyes off the coffin. Isabel's face looked so peaceful, so alive. She felt that something was wrong, but who would believe her that night? While everyone was crying, Maria wondered if Isabel would still wake up somehow. At that moment, Isabel felt as if she were submerged in infinite darkness, a prison she could not see, but which squeezed her from all sides. The feeling of cold on her skin was sharp, but nothing compared to the despair of being conscious and unable to move a single muscle. She wanted to scream, but her voice seemed buried along with her. "Where am I?" she thought, fighting the fear that was turning into panic. She heard distant sounds, footsteps, the noise of objects moving, muffled voices she couldn't make out. Every sound seemed to echo, as if she were in a closed, narrow space. Inside, Isabel desperately to react. "I'm here, please. Someone hear me." Her mind throbbed with a silent scream as the reality around her became increasingly clear. They were preparing her for something, but for what? Inside that motionless body, Isabel felt her. She felt her touch. She knew someone was there, but no matter how much she wanted to open her eyes, raise her hands, or move her lips, she couldn't. It was as if her body was disconnected from her mind. "Don't leave me here," begging in silence. Isabel's anguish increased as time passed. The voices from outside began to disappear, replaced by an even more terrifying sirens. They were going to leave her there, bury her, and if no one realized she was still alive, the sound of the coffin hinges was heard like the final blow of a cruel sentence, leaving Isabel completely alone in the darkness. She tried once to move a finger, an eyelid, anything that could send a signal to the outside world, but nothing happened. Inside the cold wood, Isabel listened to the movements, feeling every impact as she was transported to the funeral home. The world around her seemed distant, but she was trapped there, alive, and every second was a struggle against despair. How long until someone noticed? What if it was too late? The funeral home was silent except for the muffled sound of the sobs of family and friends. Maria, however, was oblivious to everything. She sat in a chair near Isabel's coffin, her hands clutching a photograph of her daughter that she had taken a few months earlier. In the photo, Isabel smiled with a guitar on her lap, her eyes shining with dreams that now seemed to crumble in her mother's memories. The emptiness Maria felt was so great that it seemed to devour the air around her. How did this happen? The question echoed in her mind incessantly. Isabel was healthy, strong, full of life. There were no signs, no warnings, just a normal morning that turned into the worst day of her life. "She was here yesterday," Maria whispered, almost voiceless, as tears ran down her face. Some relatives tried to comfort her, but no one knew what to say. How do you comfort a mother who lost her only daughter so suddenly? Maria stood up, trembling, and walked toward the coffin. Her steps were slow, as if each movement were an unbearable weight. She looked at Isabel, who was dressed in her favorite blue dress, the same one she wore in her last musical performance. "My girl, why did you leave me?" she whispered, her voice broken by tears. Maria ran her hand over her daughter's face, feeling the cold, rigid texture of her skin. It was a cruel contrast to the memory of the warmth of Isabel's touch. Isabel. She leaned her forehead against the glass of the coffin and began to sob uncontrollably. "You were everything to me. Everything." Suddenly, the weight of the pain was too much. Maria felt the world around her spinning. The last thing she saw was the photograph of Isabel slipping from her hands and falling to the floor before her body gave way. She fainted, falling at the foot of the coffin. The commotion was immediate. Family members rushed to help her, fanning her and calling her name. But Maria seemed unwilling to return. It was as if, at that moment, her soul had surrendered to the void. Unable to bear the pain, Ramon couldn't stop thinking about the poorly filled-out papers without exams. The image of Isabel lying in the coffin with her skin still slightly rosy tormented his mind. He tried to convince himself that it was just his imagination, but something deep in his heart screamed that he was wrong to let that moment pass. He opened the drawer where Isabel's case documents were filed and began to review them carefully. As he read, his concern turned into a chill down his spine. The death report was extremely superficial, with incomplete information. Ramon noticed the absence of a vital test. The electrocardiogram that would confirm Isabel's cardiac death was never performed. They had declared her death based on the absence of obvious signs, without any conclusive evidence. "This can't be right," Ramon muttered, his heart racing. He continued reviewing the papers, looking for something that would justify such negligence. The timelines didn't match, the accounts were confusing, and it seemed that the team had assumed death without proper confirmation. Ramon felt a wave of indignation and guilt. If they made a mistake, Isabel could be alive, and I left her there in that coffin without doing anything. Ramon's mind raced. This mistake was not just a bureaucratic oversight, it was a failure that could cost a life. He knew he had to act. But how? The wake was underway. The family was devastated, and he had no concrete proof that Isabel was still alive, only doubts. Ramon closed the documents with trembling hands. He knew that if he exposed this, he could be accused of negligence. But at the same time, what was more important, his career or Isabel's life? He knew that the funeral home would not support him if he decided to investigate further. The owner, Javier, had already made it clear that he wanted the case resolved quickly and without complications. Ramon closed his eyes and remembered his own daughter, whom he had lost years ago. Back then, he had also trusted the doctors and accepted the diagnosis without question. But what if he had investigated further? He could have saved his daughter. The weight of that memory crushed him. He wondered if he was being guided by guilt from the past, or by the intuition that something was really wrong. He looked at his reflection in the small mirror hanging on the wall. What if I'm right? What if I can save this girl? But at the same time, a voice in his head warned him. What if you're wrong? Destroying your career, you will cause more suffering to the family. Ramon got up restlessly and began to pace back and forth. He picked up the phone several times, thinking about calling Isabel's mother, Maria, but he hesitated. What would he tell her? That there was a small chance that her daughter was alive? How would she react? Finally, Ramon made a decision. He knew he had to act, but he couldn't do it alone. He picked up the phone again and called Maria. A man answered. At that moment, Maria had fainted. "Hello, this is Ramon, the person in charge of preparing Isabel's body. I know this may seem strange, but something is not right, and I need your permission to investigate further." There was silence on the other end of the line, and then Jorge's voice, low and charged with emotion, replied, "What do you mean by that? She's dead?" "No." Ramon hesitated for a moment, but he knew he couldn't hide the truth. "There is a small but real possibility that she is alive." Jorge's breathing became agitated. "Tell me what I have to do. If there is a chance, even a slim one, I will not give up on her." Ramon hung up the phone, feeling the weight of his decision. He knew he was risking everything, but at that moment, he decided he would do whatever it took to discover the truth. Maria was sitting at the wake, but the weight of her grief seemed unbearable. Her eyes were swollen from crying so much, reflecting her sadness during her fainting spell. It wasn't just a blackout. It was a dream so vivid that it seemed real. She found herself in a strange place. Everything around her was gray and foggy, as if the world were suspended between reality and something beyond. Maria walked barefoot on the cold, damp ground beneath her feet. She felt her heart beating hard in her chest, as if something terrible were about to happen. "Bella," she called out with a trembling voice. The silence was deafening, but suddenly, a sound echoed in the distance. A faint cry, almost inaudible. "Mama!" Maria stopped, her heart racing. She would recognize that voice anywhere. "Isabel, daughter, where are you?" The cry grew louder, now accompanied by muffled words. "Mama, please don't leave me here!" Maria began to run, following the sound of the voice. The fog around her seemed to grow denser, but she didn't stop. Each step brought her closer to her daughter. Then she saw something in front of her, a deep well with stones worn down by decades. She approached and looked inside. There was Isabel, her eyes filled with tears, reflecting the dim light coming from above. She stretched her hands toward Maria, desperately begging, "Mom, get me out of here. Don't leave me, please." Maria tried to reach her, but the well seemed to get deeper and deeper, and her hands could never reach Isabel. "Beautiful, I'm here. I'm going to get you out. I promise." "You can't hear me. No one can!" Isabel shouted. The echo of her voice broke the silence. "But I'm here. Don't give up, Mom." Maria, crying, began to pull on a rope that appeared out of nowhere, trying somehow to bring her daughter up, but the rope slipped from her hands, and Isabel seemed to move further away. "No, my daughter, don't go." It was at that moment that she woke up, her body covered in cold sweat. She was sitting in a chair with family members around her. Her eyes opened slowly, and the first thing she saw was Isabel's coffin. The feeling of loss crushed her chest, but the dream was still alive in her mind. She grabbed her sister's arm, who was next to her. "Isabel, she's alive. I know it." Her sister looked at her sadly. "Maria, it was just a dream, a reflection of your pain." "No, it wasn't," she insisted. "Maria," her voice full of conviction. "I heard her voice. She was calling me, begging me not to leave her. I know she's still here somehow. She needs to rest." "Maria," said her sister. "I can't," Maria replied, her eyes fixed on a distant point. "Something's wrong. I feel like it wasn't just a dream." Before she could finish, the phone rang. The sharp sound made Maria shudder, as if she already knew that this call would bring something that would change everything. On the other end of the line, Ramon hesitated to speak. He knew there was no easy way to explain what he was about to say. When Maria answered, her trembling voice echoed on the line. "Señora Maria, this is Ramon. I'm in charge of preparing your daughter's body. I called you a moment ago." Maria's heart raced. "Yes, doctor. What happened?" Ramon took a deep breath before continuing. "Señora, as I mentioned earlier on the phone, I need the wake to be empty so I can re-examine Isabel's body." Maria froze, the phone trembling in her hand. "Re-examine? What do you mean by that? My daughter is dead." "As I mentioned to the young man who answered the call earlier," Ramon replied, trying to remain calm. "But something doesn't seem right. The death report is incomplete, and I noticed some details that I can't ignore." Maria felt the air leave her for a moment. The memory of the dream appeared in her mind. Isabel's desperate voice calling her, begging her not to leave her in the well. "Are you saying my daughter could be alive?" "I can't say anything for sure," Ramon replied, "but I need to check before it's too late." Doubt consumed her. Logic told her that Isabel was gone, but Maria's heart, which had already felt the warmth of her daughter's hand and heard her call in the dream, screamed that Ramon was right. "Why now? Why not before?" Maria asked, her voice thick with emotion. Ramon swallowed hard. "I hesitated, and now that's killing me. Please trust me. I can't ignore what I saw." Maria looked at Isabel's portrait. That radiant smile seemed to beg her to trust her intuition. Tears ran down Maria's face as she clutched the phone tightly. "All right, I give you my permission. But if you're wrong," her voice broke, and Ramon finished, "If I'm wrong, I'll carry this guilt for the rest of my life." When she hung up the phone, Maria fell to her knees, hugging her daughter's portrait. Could there still be hope? Was my dream a sign, or just the delirium of a grieving mother? The funeral parlor was enveloped in a heavy silence, as if even time had decided to stop to respect the mourning. Outside, Maria walked back and forth, unable to go back inside. Her heart was torn between faith in the dream she had and the overwhelming fear of clinging to a hope that might not exist. Suddenly, the sound of quick footsteps echoed in the hallway. Ramon was coming toward the wake, his face marked by a mixture of urgency and guilt. When Maria saw him, she looked directly at him, her gaze full of questions she didn't dare ask out loud. "Doctor," Maria began hesitantly, "do you really think that?" "I don't know yet," Ramon interrupted, trying to hide his nervousness. "But if there's even the slightest chance, we need to act now." Maria followed him to the door of the wake room, but stopped just outside, unable to take another step. "I can't go in," she confessed, her voice breaking. "If she's still dead, I won't be able to bear it." Ramon nodded gently and went in alone. The air inside of the room seemed even colder than outside. Isabel's coffin was exactly where it should be, but as Ramon approached, something made him stop halfway. There was something different. When he looked closer, his heart raced. Isabel's body was in a different position than when he had left it. He remembered clearly that when he had prepared the body, he had placed her hands crossed on her chest, as was customary. But now one of her hands seemed to be slightly dropped to one side, her fingers almost touching the edge of the coffin. Ramon took another step closer, feeling his heart beating fast. He looked at Isabel's face. What he saw left him speechless. There was a slight change in her expression. It wasn't just the lifeless face he had seen before. She looked more relaxed, almost as if she were trying to move. "This can't be," he whispered to himself, struggling to process what he was seeing. He reached out his trembling hand and touched Isabel's skin. It was still cold, but again, not cold enough for a body that should have been dead for so long. Then Ramon did something he knew was a big risk. He slightly opened Isabel's eyelid and shone a small flashlight on her eye. At that very moment, something inexplicable happened. There was a slight contraction, almost imperceptible, but real. Isabel's eye trembled in the light. Ramon swallowed, feeling a rush of adrenaline. Ramon stood motionless, his hands trembling. "She's alive," he whispered, unable to believe it. Maria, hearing the tone of Ramon's voice, stepped forward, hope shining in her eyes. "What happened? She's alive? She's alive, doctor?" Ramon raised a hand, asking for silence. His mind was working quickly as he took out the stethoscope he always carried in his pocket. He placed it carefully on Isabel's chest, holding his breath. "Please, please let me hear something. Anything." At first there seemed to be only emptiness, that absolute silence he feared to hear more than anything else. But then, a faint sound reached his ears. It was irregular, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A heartbeat. Ramon stood motionless for a moment, trying to process what he had just heard. Then he looked at Maria, who was already kneeling near the coffin, her hands trembling with anxiety. "She's alive," Ramon finally said, his voice breaking. Maria covered her mouth with her hands, letting tears fall uncontrollably. She began to sob, a mixture of relief and despair. "I knew it! I knew she was here. She was still with me." Ramon held Maria's shoulder, both sharing a moment of absolute disbelief and gratitude, but the doctor knew that this was only the beginning. "Maria, we have to get her out of here now. The heartbeat is weak, very weak. If we don't act fast," Maria interrupted with an affirmative gesture, quickly wiping away her tears. "Do whatever it takes. Save my daughter." Ramon looked at Isabel once more, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He knew that his decision to act had been risky, but that slight tremor in her eyelids and that faint sound of life justified everything. But would they have arrived in time, or had Isabel's body spent too much time on the brink of death in the small village where everyone knew each other? The news of Isabel's resurrection spread like wildfire. No one could believe what they were hearing. The young woman who had been declared dead and mourned by her own family was alive. "How is this possible?" the astonished residents asked. Rumors ranged from the supernatural to medical negligence. Some said it was a miracle from God. while others demanded explanations on local social media. The case began to gain strength, with indignant comments appearing in droves. How could doctors make such a serious mistake? What if this happened to someone else? What kind of system allows them to declare a girl dead without being sure? Maria, meanwhile, was oblivious to the commotion. Her mind was completely focused on Isabel. The only thing that mattered was the life of her daughter, so fragile and hanging by a thread. Ramon, on the other hand, knew that the repercussions were not only on Isabel's life. It was about what that mistake represented. He looked at the chaos in the messages he was receiving on his cell phone at the funeral home and felt the weight of responsibility. Could he deal with the consequences of exposing the truth? Or would he be crushed by the fury of the community? The ambulance raced through the streets as the sound of the siren cut through the air inside the vehicle. Ramon was next to Isabel, monitoring her vital signs, while Maria gripped her daughter's hand tightly, as if the connection between them could prevent Isabel from leaving. "She'll be okay, right?" Maria asked, her voice laden with despair. Ramon hesitated before answering. He knew the odds were low, but he couldn't discourage the mother. "She's strong. Isabel is fighting." Upon arriving at the hospital, the scene was chaotic. Doctors and nurses surrounded Isabel, quickly taking her to the emergency unit. The equipment began to beep. Tests were being performed frantically, but no one could understand exactly what was happening. "Her vital signs are unstable, but she's alive," a nurse reported. "How did she survive so long out there?" Maria waited with a pale face and trembling hands. Ramon was by her side, trying to comfort her, but he himself was burdened with guilt over the time lost. If they had acted sooner, would she be better? Isabel's condition. Hours passed, but the agony seemed endless. Finally, a doctor came out of the emergency room with a serious expression. "We did everything we could to stabilize her. Now only time will tell." Maria fell to her knees, clutching her chest as if the pain would crush her. "Time. I've already lost so much time. Please, doctor, save my daughter." The doctor helped her up, touching her shoulder gently. "We're doing everything we can, but now it's up to her." Inside the room, Isabel was surrounded by machines that monitored every detail of her body. Her expression remained serene, but the silence of her body contrasted with her unstable vital signs. Maria came in and sat down next to her, holding her hand as she always did. "Beautiful. I know you're tired, but I need you. You're my reason for living. Please come back to me." On the other side of the window, Ramon watched the scene with a lump in his throat. He knew that this struggle was not only Isabel's, it was everyone's. The hospital room was enveloped in a silence that seemed to reflect Maria's prayers. She sat next to Isabel's bed, holding her daughter's hand. With each passing day, her heart was torn between hope and fear. Isabel was alive, but motionless, as if trapped in a deep sleep from which no one knew when or if she would wake up. Maria did not leave her side for a minute. She spent her days talking to Isabel, reading her favorite books, or simply letting tears fall as she stroked her daughter's hair. "You are beautiful. You are the strongest girl I know. If you made it this far, I know you can come back with me," she said with a broken voice. The doctors were careful not to raise false hopes. Ramon visited her frequently, always carrying that mixture of relief for having saved Isabel and the weight of guilt for not having acted before. "Ramon, she's going to come back, right?" Maria asked once again, as she did on every visit. "I want to believe so, Maria, but it's still a mystery. How she got this far is now up to her strength," Ramon replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Deep down, he didn't know the answer either, but that morning, something happened. Maria was reading a book aloud, something Isabel loved when she was a child. Suddenly, she felt a slight movement in her daughter's hand. It was so that for a moment she thought it was her imagination. Maria held her breath, staring at her daughter's hand, and then it happened again. Isabel's fingers moved, almost like a reflex, but enough to make Maria's heart race. Ramon shouted excitedly, "She moved!" Ramon ran into the room, followed by a nurse. He put his hand on Isabel's forehead, checked her vital signs, and then looked at her fingers. For a moment, everything was silent until he saw it too. Isabel's fingers contracted slightly, as if trying to reach for something. "It's a good sign, Maria," "An excellent sign," said Ramon, feeling a spark of hope grow inside him. Maria fell to her knees beside the bed, squeezing her daughter's hand tightly, as if that movement were the answer to all her prayers. "I knew it, Bella. I knew you were there." The nurse visibly moved, touched Maria's shoulder. "This could be the beginning of something bigger. We need to monitor her." The following days were filled with expectation. Maria remained attentive to every small sign, every change in Isabel's expression, and slowly other signs began to appear. A movement in her foot, a deeper sigh, small gestures that filled the room with hope. The days of small victories became a mixture of relief and terror for Isabel, as her body began to respond slowly and hesitantly. Something in her mind seemed to have remained trapped in that dark place where it had been for so long. It was on a quiet morning when the first sign of trauma appeared. Maria was by Isabel's side, as always, holding her hand while reading one of her daughter's favorite poems. Isabel's eyes, which still could not focus completely, began to open. It was a miracle for Maria, who immediately put the book down and caressed her daughter's face. "My beautiful girl, you're back. I'm here. I'm with you." But what began as a moment of joy quickly turned into something very different. Isabel blinked slowly, her eyes scanning the room as if she didn't recognize where she was. Then something changed in her expression. Her previously motionless body began to move slightly, and her breathing became irregular, as if she were suffocating. "Beautiful, what's wrong?" Maria asked desperately, trying to calm her down. Isabel's gaze fixed on the white ceiling, and it was as if her mind had been transported to another place. A cold, dark place, and suffocating coffin images flashed through her mind, like flashes. The muffled sound of the coffin closing, the feel of wood against her motionless fingers, the feeling of being trapped and unable to scream. Isabel began to gasp, tears running down her cheeks as her mouth tried to move, but no sound came out. "Mom." The word came out weak, almost inaudible, but laden with terror. Maria called the doctors immediately, but even they seemed unable to fully understand what was happening. Ramon arrived shortly after and tried to reassure Isabel. He put his hand on her forehead and spoke calmly. "Isabel, you're safe now. You're not there anymore. You can trust us." But Isabel's eyes remained wide open, lost in the torment that would not let her go. Ramon looked at Maria, who was crying beside the bed. "She's reliving what happened, or rather said what she felt while she was trapped." In the days that followed, the panic attacks repeated themselves every time Isabel closed her eyes, every time she tried to rest. Her mind took her back to the coffin, to the weight of the wood, and the suffocating silence. Every dream was a cry for help that she couldn't control. Maria did everything she could to comfort her during the nights, holding her daughter's hand and whispering words of love. "Now you are here with me, beautiful. I will not let anything hurt you again." But Isabel cried silently, her voice still weak but full of pain. "I was there, Mom, alone for so long. I thought no one would come." Maria felt helpless. She knew she could not erase what Isabel had experienced. All she could do was be by her side, holding her hand. While she struggled to find peace again, and while Isabel faced her traumas, Ramon searched for answers. He knew that what she was going through was more than just a simple reflection of fear. It was a deep mark left by the mistake that almost took her away from this world. Due to the public outcry, the day of the trial came quickly, and the small town was in an uproar. Everyone wanted justice for Isabel, the young girl who had been abandoned on the brink of death by those who should have protected her. The courtroom was filled with family, friends, and onlookers, and the room was a portrait of tension and emotion. Maria sat in the front row, her eyes fixed on the judge as she held a photo of Isabel against her chest. On the opposite side, the two paramedics accused of negligence sat with their heads bowed. They knew their chances of redemption were almost nil. Ramon, however, sat alone, his shoulders weighed down with guilt and exhaustion. He knew his involvement would be questioned, but he also knew he could no longer hide the truth. The prosecutor began the trial by presenting the case. The evidence was clear. Isabel was declared dead without a proper examination. "This mistake almost cost the life of a healthy young woman full of dreams," he said, looking directly at the paramedics. As professionals, it is unacceptable that they did not follow basic protocols. The paramedics tried to defend themselves, but their voices were drowned out by the weight of the accusations. One of them, his eyes filled with tears, said, "We really believed she was dead. It wasn't out of malice. It was human error." The room fell silent, a silence charged with indignation. When it was Ramon's turn to testify, the tension in the room increased. Some saw him as a hero, the man who had the courage to reopen Isabel's case and save her. Others, however, questioned why he had not acted sooner. He took a deep breath before beginning. "I am Ramon, an employee of the funeral home, but also a retired doctor. When I received Isabel's body, something deeply disturbed me. The color of her skin, the residual heat. Something didn't make sense." The judge interrupted him. "And why didn't you act immediately?" Ramon hesitated, feeling the weight of his decision once again. "Because I was pressured. The owners wanted speed because the family wanted to proceed with the wake. Urgently. And to be honest, I was also afraid of being wrong." Maria watched him silently, tears running down her face. She knew Ramon was trying to do the right thing, but the initial mistake still weighed heavily. Ramon continued, "I also faced resistance from the ambulance doctors when I questioned the death certificate. They didn't take me seriously. They told me I was exaggerating, that it wasn't my place to doubt their assessment. But something told me I had to insist, and thank God I did." The prosecutor stood up, staring intently at Ramon. "Doctor, you look like a hero or a culprit in this case." Ramon lowered his head, his voice trembling with emotion. "I see myself as a man who hesitated when he shouldn't have. I saved Isabel at the last moment, but I know I could have acted sooner. I will never forgive myself for that." The room fell silent for a moment until Maria stood up. Her voice was firm, though filled with emotion, and it resonated throughout the courtroom. "Ramon saved my daughter. He is not a perfect man, but he is a man who followed his conscience when no one else did. If he hadn't acted, Isabel would be dead." Ramon's eyes filled with tears. Those words moved him deeply, but they did not ease his guilt. He knew that even though he had acted in the end, his hesitation had cost precious days in Isabel's fight. The trial ended with a final ruling. The paramedics had their licenses revoked, prohibiting them from practicing their profession again. As for Ramon, he was acquitted of the formal charges of negligence, but he left the courtroom a man marked by both guilt and the gratitude of the community. But questions remained. The mistake that almost cost Isabel her life could have been avoided. Could Ramon lose himself and move on? Or would that weight accompany him forever? As the courtroom dispersed, Maria approached Ramon and took his hand. "You saved my daughter, and for that I will be eternally grateful." Ramon looked at her with tears in his eyes, but still unable to smile. "I hope that one day Isabel can forgive me for not acting sooner." The day was gray when Ramon decided to visit Isabel in the hospital. He had hesitated for hours before mustering the courage to go since the trial. His mind could find no rest. He had saved Isabel's life, but the weight of what almost happened consumed him. The scene of the motionless body in the coffin, the cold touch of her skin, and the doubt he had carried for days before acting were ghosts that haunted him. Upon entering the room, Ramon saw Isabel lying in bed, still connected to various machines. She looked so fragile, but also alive, a miracle he almost didn't have the courage to believe in. Maria was sitting next to her daughter, holding her hand as she always did. When she saw Ramon, she smiled slightly, a smile that conveyed gratitude, but also exhaustion. "Ramon, I'm so glad you came," Maria said in a soft voice. Ramon took a few steps inside, holding his hat tightly in his hands. He stopped next to the bed and looked at Isabel, who seemed to be asleep. "How is she today?" he asked without taking his eyes off her. "She's getting better little by little," Maria replied. "But sometimes she has nightmares. She calls me and you too." Ramon felt a lump in his throat. Hearing that, he knew he couldn't avoid that conversation any longer. He needed to face Isabel and his own guilt. "Maria, can I have a moment alone with her?" Maria hesitated, but nodded. She got up and left the room, closing the door carefully. Ramon stood there in silence, simply looking at Isabel. He approached and sat down next to the bed, while the sound of the monitors filled the void. "Isabel," he began, in a low, trembling voice. "I need to tell you this." He gently took her hand, feeling her skin, still fragile but warm. "I almost failed you when I saw you that day. Something inside me said that something was wrong, but I hesitated. I should have done more. I should have believed what my heart was telling me." Ramon took a deep breath, feeling tears welling up in his eyes. "Forgive me, Isabel. Please, for not seeing it before, for almost letting you go." For a moment, everything remained silent. Ramon lowered his head, by guilt. But then something happened, a slight movement. He looked down and saw it. Isabel's fingers were squeezing his hand. It was a weak squeeze, but full of intention. Ramon opened his eyes wide, feeling his heart race. He looked at her face and for the first time saw that Isabel's eyes were slowly opening, not completely, but enough to see the light returning. "Beautiful," he whispered, almost without believing it. Isabel tried to speak, but only a soft sound escaped her lips. Even so, the squeeze of her hand said it all. Ramon felt tears running down his face, but this time they were not tears of guilt. They were tears of relief. "Thank you," he said, holding her hand tighter. "Thank you for forgiving me." Maria entered the room at that moment. Seeing the scene, her eyes filled with tears at the sight of Ramon's emotional gaze and her daughter's hand holding his. She ran to the other side of the bed, placing her hand on Isabel's face. "My beautiful love, you are coming back to us." Ramon got up slowly, making room for Maria. He knew he still had a long road ahead of him, but at that moment, something inside him began to calm down. Isabel's fight to live not only saved her, but also Ramon's soul. As he left the room, the question that had consumed him for days finally found an answer. Isabel's hospital room was lit by the soft light of dusk, but to her everything seemed shrouded in shadows. Every beep from the monitor next to her bed seemed to resonate with an invisible weight. "They forgot me." Sitting on the bed with her hands still trembling, Isabel looked out of the window. Outside, the world seemed to be moving on. Cars passed by. People laughed. The sun shone, but inside her something was broken, something she didn't know if she could fix. Maria entered the room with a warm smile, carrying a plate of soup. "Beautiful. I brought you something to eat. Are you feeling a little better, daughter?" Isabel did not respond immediately. Her eyes did not stray from the window. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, almost a whisper. "Mom, why did this happen to me?" The question made Maria pause. She placed the plate on the table next to the bed and sat down, taking her daughter's hand. "What do you mean, my love?" Isabel turned her head, and Maria saw the deep pain in her eyes. "Why didn't anyone see me? Why didn't anyone realize I was still here?" Maria felt a lump in her throat, but tried to remain calm. "Bella, it was a mistake, a terrible mistake. But we're here now. You're alive, and that's what matters. Alive." Isabel let out a bitter laugh that soon turned into tears. "I was trapped in that place, Mom, alone, screaming for help, and no one heard me. I thought they had forgotten me." The words cut Maria like a knife. She tried to hug Isabel, but her daughter recoiled, hugging her own knees. "I feel like I'm not the same anymore. My life is no longer my own." Maria began to cry, but she didn't give up. She took Isabel's face in her hands, forcing her to look her in the eyes. "Bella, they didn't forget you. I never stopped fighting for you. Ramon never stopped fighting. You're here because we believed you were still with us." But Isabel shook her head, tears rolling down her face. "But I'm not the same. When I close my eyes, I go back to that place. And when I wake up, I feel like the life I had before was stolen from me." The silence in the room was heavy. Maria didn't know how to respond to her daughter's pain, a pain she couldn't erase, but she knew she couldn't give up on helping her. "Beautiful, your life isn't over. I know it's difficult now, but we'll find a way to move forward together." Isabel took a deep breath, trying to calm her crying, but the emptiness was still there like a constant shadow. "What if I never get over this? What if this fear never goes away?" Maria took her hand firmly. "You don't have to face this alone. I'll be with you every step of the way, and if we fall, we'll get up together. We'll get up." Tears rolled down both their faces as Maria hugged her. For the first time, Isabel allowed herself to relax in her mother's arms, but the question continued to echo in her mind. Why did they forget me? Why didn't anyone save me before it was too late? Maria knew that these wounds would not heal easily. The shadow of death was there, stalking Isabel. The days passed slowly, and the shadow of trauma continued to hang over her. Maria sat in a corner, watching her daughter with a lump in her throat. How could she give her child the will to live? Then Maria had an idea. She left the hospital without saying anything and returned an hour later, carrying Isabel's guitar. It was the same instrument her daughter loved, which always seemed like an extension of her soul. That guitar was a symbol of the life Isabel had left behind, but also a bridge to what she could regain. "Here," said Maria, placing the guitar carefully on the bed. "I brought you something." Isabel looked at the instrument with a mixture of surprise and fear. Her hand trembled slightly as she touched it, as if she couldn't believe it was still real. "So long ago," Isabel murmured in a low, uncertain voice. Maria knelt down beside the bed. "I know you feel like you've lost everything, but music has always been your way of expressing yourself. Maybe it can help you now." Isabel looked at the guitar again. It was true that music had always been the place where she found peace, where she could be herself, but at the same time, she felt that part of her had been trapped in the coffin, along with the fear and silence that had almost consumed her. "I don't know if I can, Mom," she said with tears rolling down her cheeks. "You never have to do it alone, beautiful," Maria replied with a soft smile. "I'm here with you, as I always have been." With trembling hands, Isabel picked up the guitar and placed it on her lap. The wood felt heavier than she remembered, as if the instrument carried with the weight of her pain. Isabel took a deep breath and tried to play the first chords of a melody she had known since childhood. Her fingers placed themselves on the strings, but when she tried to press them, her hand shook violently. The sound that came out was distorted, broken, so different from the fluid music she used to play. She tried again, but the result was the same with every attempt. It seemed like a cruel reminder that something inside her was different, broken. Tears began to fall as her hands trembled even more until she let go of the guitar with a frustrated sigh. "I can't," said Isabel, her voice full of pain. Maria quickly grabbed the guitars before it fell, but she didn't try to insist. Instead, she put the instrument aside and took Isabel's hands. "It doesn't have to be today, my love. You went through something that no one should have to go through. It's normal to need time." Isabel shook her head. Tears streamed freely. "I lost everything, Mom. Even this. Music was the only thing that made me feel alive, and now I don't even know who I am." Maria hugged Isabel tightly, feeling her daughter's pain as if it were her own. "You are still my beautiful girl. Music is not lost, just as you are not lost. You can take as much time as you need, but it is still inside you." Even with her mother's comfort, Isabel felt broken. The notes that once flowed so naturally now seemed trapped, like everything she had experienced. It was a rainy afternoon when Maria heard a soft knock on the door of Isabel's hospital room. Surprised, she opened the door and found a young woman standing there, holding an envelope in her hands. Camila, one of Isabel's most dedicated students, had eyes shining with a mixture of shyness and determination. "Mrs. Maria, may I come in?" she asked hesitantly. Maria nodded excitedly. "Of course, my dear. Isabel will be happy to see you." Camila entered the room with light steps, as if afraid of disturbing the silence. She stopped next to the bed, looking at Isabel, who still seemed so fragile. "Teacher, it's me, Camila," she said in a trembling voice. "I brought something for you." Isabel, lying in bed, slowly raised her eyes when she recognized Camila. A spark of emotion passed over her face, but it soon disappeared, replaced by an expression of melancholy. "Camila, what are you doing here?" The young woman smiled, even though tears were beginning to form in her eyes. She held out the envelope to Isabel. "We wrote a letter. All your students wanted you to know that we are waiting for you." Isabel took the envelope with trembling hands. Maria approached, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder, while Camila encouraged her with a warm look. Carefully, Isabel opened the envelope and took out a sheet of paper filled with affectionate words and colorful drawings. Tears began to stream down her face as she read each sentence. It seemed to fill the room with the voices of her students. "Teacher, we miss you. Music isn't the same without you. Please come back soon. We need you." At the end of the letter, a sentence written by Camila caught her attention. "You taught me to never give up. Now I need you to come back to teach us that again." Isabel pressed the letter to her chest and began to cry silently. Camila, moved, took her hand. "Teacher, you always said that music heals. Please don't stop trying. We believe in you." Maria watched the scene with a mixture of pride and sadness. She knew that those words were exactly what Isabel needed to hear, but she also knew that the road to recovery would be long and painful after Camila left, leaving a trail of hope in the air. Maria sat down next to Isabel's bed. The letter was still in her daughter's hands, but her expression remained distant. "They miss you, beautiful. They need you," said Maria, trying to hold back her tears. "What if I'm no longer capable?" replied Isabel, her voice breaking. "What if that part of me died in that coffin?" Maria took her hands firmly, looking into her eyes full of pain. "You're alive, Isabel. Against all odds, you're here. That means you still have a mission, something to share with the world." Isabel looked away, but Maria continued. "You're not alone, beautiful. You'll never be alone again. I promise I'll never leave you alone again. No matter what happens, I'll be here." The strength in Maria's words made Isabel feel something she hadn't felt in a long time, a small spark of hope. She held her mother's hand tighter, as if seeking support to face the fears that consumed her. Maria hugged her, letting their tears mix. "We'll get through this together, daughter, and when you're ready, the world will hear your music again." Maria's promise seemed to light up the room like a beacon in the darkness that still surrounded Isabel. It was late afternoon when Ramon arrived at the hospital for another visit. He was carrying a small bouquet of simple but colorful flowers. Isabel was resting, and Maria, as always, was sitting next to her. When she saw Ramon enter, she smiled softly, although there was a shadow of fatigue in his eyes. "Ramon, it's always good to see you," said Maria, getting up. "Isabel is asleep, but I'm sure she'll be happy to know you came." Ramon nodded and placed the flowers in a makeshift vase next to the bed. He looked at Isabel for a moment with a serious but tender expression. Then he turned to Maria. "Maria, can I talk to you outside?" Something in his tone made Maria feel that it would not be an easy subject. She nodded and followed Ramon into the hallway. They both sat down on a nearby bench, while Ramon looked at his hands, as if searching for the right words. "What's wrong, Ramon?" Maria asked worriedly. He took a deep breath, his voice low and heavy with emotion. "Maria, I haven't been completely honest with you from the beginning. There was something that motivated me to act, something that goes beyond what happened with Isabel." Maria frowned, leaning slightly toward him. "What do you mean?" Ramon looked up, and Maria saw something she had never seen before. Deep, ancient pain hidden behind his usually calm expression. "A few years ago, I lost my daughter. Maria was the same age as Isabel." Maria's eyes widened in surprise, feeling her breath catch in her throat. Ramon continued, his voice now trembling. "It was sudden, a medical error, like in Isabel's case. I trusted the professionals, but then I discovered that she could have been saved if they had acted in time. I never got over that." He paused, trying to control the tears that threatened to spill out. "When I saw Isabel in that room, something inside me awakened. It was like a second chance. I knew that if I didn't do something, I would be allowing another young girl full of life to be torn from her family." Maria felt tears rolling down her face as she listened to Ramon's words. Suddenly, everything made sense. His hesitation, his guilt, and his determination to save Isabel at all costs. "Ramon didn't know," she said, her voice breaking. He shook his head, letting the tears finally fall. "I never talked about this, because I feel like I failed as a father. I couldn't save my daughter, and that destroyed me. When I saw Isabel, it was as if I had a chance to make things right, even though I couldn't change the past." Maria took his hand and squeezed it tightly. "You saved my daughter, Ramon. You gave her a second chance, and you gave me the chance to have my little girl back. It wasn't just about redemption, it was about love." Ramon looked at Maria, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time: relief. For the first time, he felt that someone understood the weight he carried. "I just hope that Isabel can forgive me someday for the time it took me to act." Maria wiped her tears and shook her head. "Ramon, my daughter has already forgiven you. You are the reason she is still here. And somehow I think you gave your daughter something she never had: justice." The two remained seated in silence for a moment, connected by pain, but also by hope. Ramon's confession not only shed light on his own struggle, but also strengthened the bond between him and Maria, a bond that was born from the fight for Isabel's life and was now unbreakable. Maria knew that Ramon would continue to carry the scars of the past, but she also knew that by saving Isabel, he had begun to heal the wounds of his soul. As they returned to the room, they both felt that despite everything, they were on the right path to transforming that pain into something that could bring strength and renewal. The physical therapy room was silent, except for the sound of Maria's careful footsteps beside Isabel. The young woman was standing, holding on to the parallel bars that served as support while she tried to maintain her balance. Her legs were visibly shaking, still weak from the time she spent immobile, but her eyes were fixed on her goal: to take that first step. Maria, at her side, held her daughter's hands, offering her both physical and emotional support. "You can do it, beautiful. One step at a time. I'm here with you." Isabel took a deep breath, sweat running down her forehead. She knew that this moment was about more than just regaining the strength in her legs. It was an attempt to reconnect with life, to show herself that she could move forward. With effort, she lifted her right foot and tried to move it forward, but before she could balance herself, her body faltered and she lost control. Isabel fell to her knees, letting go of the bars as tears of frustration and pain flooded her face. "I can't," she cried, her voice filled with despair. "I'll never be able to." Maria knelt down next to her immediately, wrapping her in a tight hug. "Beautiful," she said, holding her daughter's face gently. Isabel's eyes were filled with tears, but Maria remained firm. "You just took the first step. Even though you fell, it means you're trying." Isabel shook her head, her voice still trembling. "It's not enough, Mom. I want to be who I was, but it seems impossible." Maria wiped Isabel's tears with her hands, a warm smile appearing amid her own tears. "You don't need to be who you were, beautiful. You can be even stronger, even more incredible. The important thing is not to give up." She held her daughter's hands firmly, looking her in the eyes. "Don't give up on your dreams, my girl. No matter how many times you fall, I'm here to help you get back up every time." Isabel looked at her mother, feeling a wave of gratitude mixed with pain. She knew the road would be long and difficult, but those words planted a seed of hope in her heart. She took a deep breath and held onto the bars again with Maria's help. She stood up once more. The fall did not define her. The fact that she was trying was what really mattered. Weeks later, during a therapy session, Isabel sat down on a cushioned chair, staring at the floor. The therapist, a woman with a soft voice and a kind gaze, waited patiently. Maria was in the next room, giving her daughter the space she needed to face her own demons. "Are you ready to talk about this?" the therapist asked Isabel gently. Isabel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the words she had never said to anyone. For weeks, she had carried the burden of what happened in the coffin, but she knew that in order to move forward, she needed to face it. "I remember it all started with a low, hesitant voice. I remember opening my eyes and not being able to move. I could hear voices around me, but I couldn't scream." Tears began to roll down her cheeks, and the therapist offered her a tissue. Isabel accepted it, but continued talking as if the words needed to come out before the fear silenced her again. "When they put me in the coffin, I felt like they were burying me alive, being buried alive. The sound of the wood closing, the absolute silence. It was as if I had died. Although I was alive, her breathing quickened, and the therapist encouraged her to pause. "Breathe, Isabel. You are safe now." Isabel closed her eyes, trying to calm down, but the images kept flashing before her eyes. "I screamed so much inside, I asked for help. I begged for someone to hear me, but no one listened, and I thought I would never get out of there." The therapist leaned forward slightly with a firm but comforting tone. "Isabel, the fact that you are here talking about this is proof that you won. You were not forgotten. They saved you because your strength made the people around you keep looking for you." Isabel opened her eyes and met the therapist's gaze. "Then why do I still feel trapped?" "Because the pain you felt was real and it left marks. But those marks do not define who you are. They are part of your history, but they don't have to control your future." Isabel reflected on this, allowing the words to sink in. It was the first time someone had put what she was feeling into perspective. For the first time, she saw a small possibility that this weight might one day lessen. As she left the session, Maria was waiting for her. Isabel hugged her, this time more tightly than before. "Mom, I talked about it for the first time." Maria held her daughter's face, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so proud of you, beautiful. You are the bravest person I know." As they walked down the hall together, Isabel realized something. Facing the past didn't make it go away, but it helped her discover that she was stronger than she imagined. And little by little, she was ready to move on. Although Isabel was in recovery, Maria's mind could not find rest. The doubt of how something so terrible could have happened to her daughter tormented her. How could trained professional paramedics not realize that Isabel was still alive? What had gone wrong with that diagnosis? Maria felt she needed answers, not only to find peace, but also to make sure that this would never happen to anyone else. One afternoon, after leaving Isabel resting in the hospital, Maria decided to look for Ramon. He was in his small office at the funeral home, reviewing papers, when Maria entered with determination in her eyes. "Ramon, I need to know what happened to my daughter. Why did everyone think she was dead when she wasn't?" Ramon sighed and motioned for her to sit down. He took some papers from the file, including the death certificate and medical notes. "Maria, I've asked myself that question many times. I've looked for information, and there is something that could explain it, but it's not easy to accept." Maria leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Ramon's. "What is it?" "Your daughter was in a state called catalepsy," Ramon explained, showing her a medical article he had researched. "It's a rare condition. The body becomes completely immobile, and the vital signs are so low that they are almost imperceptible to someone who doesn't know about it. It looks like death, but the mind is conscious." The words hit Maria like a punch. She remembered what Isabel had said during therapy, the silence, the despair, the feeling of being alive while everyone around her thought she had passed away. So she was trapped in that state? Maria asked with tears in her eyes, and no one noticed. Ramon felt visibly uncomfortable. The paramedics did not do the proper tests. It is not common for someone in catalepsy to be mistaken for a lifeless body, but it is possible, and that is what happened with Isabel. Maria brought her hands to her face, trying to process it all. She was conscious the whole time, trapped in her own body. Ramon put a hand on her shoulder. "I know that nothing I say will change what happened, but I want you to know that Isabel's case can raise awareness about this condition. If we learn from this, maybe we can save other lives." Maria took a deep breath, absorbing Ramon's words. That didn't take away the pain, but it gave meaning to Isabel's struggle. If her experience could prevent more families from going through the same thing, maybe something good could come out of her suffering. Isabel's story had spread throughout the city and beyond. People were moved to learn about the rare condition that almost cost her her life, and they were inspired by her struggle to recover. When news of her passion for music reached the community, something extraordinary began to happen. A group of friends of the family organized a meeting in the Central Plaza, where they decided to create a charity event, a concert to raise funds not only for Isabel's recovery, but also to raise awareness in the community about catalepsy and the importance of proper diagnosis. "Isabel has always brought joy to everyone with her music," said Camila, and the student who visited Isabel. "Now it's our turn to give something back." The idea grew quickly. Local artists offered to play, merchants donated food and materials, and even the authorities helped organize the event. At the center of it all was a common goal: to support Isabel and make sure that her story reached as many people as possible. When Maria told Isabel about the concert, the reaction was immediate. "A concert for me? asked Isabel incredulously. Maria took her hand, smiling. For you, daughter. They believe in you, and they know you have so much more to give to the world. Isabel felt a lump in her throat, but this time it wasn't sadness, it was gratitude. I don't know if I'm ready. Maria caressed her face tenderly. You don't have to be. Right now, just knowing that everyone is with you is enough. In the days leading up to the concert, the hospital received dozens of letters and flowers for Isabel. People of all ages wanted to show their sapitama and share stories about how her struggle had inspired hope in their own lives. On the night of the concert, although she was not fully recovered, Isabel decided to attend. When she arrived at the plaza in a wheelchair, the crowd greeted her with applause and tears. That night was more than an event. It was a celebration of life, strength, and the music that Isabel represented. The stage was decorated simply, but every detail seemed to be made with love. Scattered flowers, soft lights hanging, and in the center, a guitar rested on a bench. Behind the stage, Isabel sat in her wheelchair, looking at the stage through the half-open curtain. The murmur of the crowd reached her like a distant wave. Maria was by her side, holding her hand. They love you. They are here for you. Isabel looked at her mother, her face full of doubt. Mom, I don't know if I can. It's as if that silence is still inside me. Every time I think about playing, I feel like I'm going to fail. Maria knelt beside her, caressing her face. It doesn't matter if you play perfectly or not. What matters is that you are here, that you fought to get to this moment, but only you can decide if you're ready. Isabel looked back at the stage. That guitar seemed like both an invitation and a burden. Outside, the audience applauded a performance that had just ended, and the presenter took the stage to announce the next act. And now, a very special moment began. With a voice full of emotion, the person who inspired all of this, Isabel, tonight is yours, and we are all here to listen to your music. The crowd gave a standing ovation, calling her with an energy that seemed to pierce through the curtains. But Isabel remained motionless, her hands trembling. I can't, she said, looking at Maria with eyes full of tears. Maria squeezed her hand tightly, trying to convey courage. It doesn't have to be today, beautiful, but I know that when you're ready, the whole world will be waiting to hear you. The presenter looked backstage, but realizing that Isabel would not appear, he improvised something to continue the show. The stage was empty for a moment, but the crowd waited patiently, filled with love and understanding. The next morning, still feeling the weight of her decision not to perform, Isabel sat in her hospital room, looking at the guitar that someone had returned to her. The instrument seemed to carry all her hopes and expectations that she felt she couldn't fulfill. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Camila, her student. The young woman entered with a shy but determined smile. Professor, may I come in? Isabel nodded, discreetly wiping the tears running down her face. Camila sat down next to the bed, holding a notebook of sheet music. She looked at Isabel with a mixture of admiration and vulnerability. I saw you yesterday, from the stage. I could see it wasn't easy for you, Isabel. She sighed, looking away. It's not easy, Camila. I feel like I'm not the same person anymore. The Isabel you knew is in the past. Camila was silent for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Then she opened the music book and showed her a page with a song that Isabel had taught her months ago. Do you remember this, Isabel? Isabel looked at the sheet music and nodded slightly. It was one of the first songs you learned, yes, Camila replied. And you taught me that music doesn't have to be perfect, but it must come from the heart. You always said that no matter how many times we make mistakes, the important thing is to keep trying. Isabel felt a lump in her throat as she listened to Camila's words. Before she could say anything, Camila took her hand and continued. Teacher, you taught me never to give up. Now I need you to teach me that again. Again. Those words washed over Isabel like a wave of emotion. Camila wasn't asking for perfection or expecting answers. She just wanted Isabel to try, just as she had taught her before. Isabel squeezed Camila's hand, feeling a small spark of courage return. Maybe, we can try together. Camila smiled, the sparkle in her eyes reflecting the hope that Isabel was beginning to feel again. The central plaza was once again filled with people of all ages occupying every corner, waiting for the last performance of the night, the most eagerly awaited. Isabel's name was on everyone's lips, but the stage remained empty. Behind the stage, Isabel took a deep breath, fighting the anxiety that seemed to oppress her chest. Maria was by her side, holding her hand firmly, while Camila tuned the guitar, ready to support her. "Mom, what if I fail? What if I can't do it?" Isabel asked, her voice trembling. Maria smiled, caressing her daughter's face. "My beautiful girl, you've already succeeded just by being here, just by trying. You've already won." Camila approached, handing the guitar to Isabel. "Remember, teacher, it's not about being perfect. It's about showing what's in your heart." Isabel held the guitar with still trembling hands, but something in Camila's words gave her strength. Even so, when she heard the announcer say her name, she felt her heart pounding. She almost turned around to run away, but Maria touched her shoulder. "I'm here, Bella. I'll always be with you." She took a deep breath and took her first steps toward the stage. Each step seemed like a challenge, but she continued. When she crossed the curtain, the crowd burst into warm applause, and Isabel felt tears threatening to fall. It was a lot of emotion, a lot of pressure, but also a lot of love. When she sat down and positioned her guitar, the noise of the crowd gradually subsided until everything was completely silent. She looked at the strings of the guitar, and then at the audience. Their eyes were fixed on her, waiting, believing, supporting. The anxiety tightened again, but Isabel closed her eyes, seeking a connection with something deeper. For a moment, the silence on stage seemed to say more than any melody. The gentle wind cut through the night, carrying the expectation. Isabel took a deep breath. She felt the weight of the strings under her fingers and began to play. The first notes resonated in the square, soft at first, but charged with emotion. The melody Isabel was playing was not something the audience recognized. It was not a song they had heard before. It was something she had written in silence during lonely nights in the hospital. Each note seemed to tell a part of her story: the fear, the despair, the struggle, and finally, the hope. When the music became more intense, Isabel opened her eyes and looked at the audience. She saw emotional faces, tears running down their cheeks, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: connection. She was telling her story without words, and they were listening. The final notes were soft, like a whisper. When Isabel finished, silence returned for a moment, but it was different. It was a silence full of meaning, a silence of respect. Then, like a wave, the crowd burst into applause and tears. People stood up clapping while others simply cried, moved by something greater than words could describe. Isabel smiled shyly, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the guitar. She had succeeded, not in being perfect, but in being authentic. In the audience, Ramon stood, unable to hold back his tears. He discreetly wiped his eyes, but his heart was overflowing. He knew that this performance was not only a moment of victory for Isabel, but also a milestone for him. He had found redemption in his courage to perform, and now he saw Isabel finding peace in her music. When Isabel looked at the crowd, her eyes met Ramon's. She paused for a moment, and her shy smile broadened with a small gesture. She waved her hand at him. It was a simple gesture, but one full of meaning. She forgave him. Ramon placed his hand on his chest, as if silently thanking her. The weight he carried seemed lighter in that moment. As the crowd continued to applaud, Isabel looked up at the sky, finally feeling at peace. She had faced the darkness, and now the music born of her pain illuminated everyone around her. When she came down from the stage, Maria was there with open arms and tears in her eyes. "You did it, beautiful. I always knew you would." Isabel hugged her, allowing herself to feel the pride and love that surrounded her. She knew the road ahead would still be long, long, but in that moment, she understood that she was no longer alone. The weeks following the concert brought something new for Isabel, a sense of purpose that she thought she would never feel again. Every message of support, every hug from an excited stranger seemed to ignite in her the desire to live life to the fullest. Little by little, She began to consider a possibility that had previously seemed distant, returning to teach music one day. While she was at home practicing with her guitar, Maria entered the living room and found her immersed in the melody she had composed in the hospital. Beautiful. That song is so beautiful. Have you thought about teaching it to your students? Isabel stopped playing. She looked at her mother with an expression of doubt and hope. Do you think I can do it, Mom? Maria knelt down beside her and took her hands. I know you can. You always said that music had the power to transform lives. And now, your story can transform even more with the support of Maria and Camila. Isabel decided to return to music school. On her first day, as she entered the classroom, she felt her heart beating fast. The room was full of familiar and new faces, all eagerly waiting for her. Camila, sitting in the front row, was the first to speak. Teacher, it's so good to have you back. Isabel smiled at her, tears threatening to fall. It's good to be back, and I want to start by saying something important. Music saved me. It helped me face the most difficult time of my life. Now I want to help you find that same strength. She picked up her guitar and began to play the melody she had written. The students listened in silence, and some cried, moved by the depth of each note. Then Isabel put the guitar aside and took a sheet of music. Today we will learn this song together. It doesn't matter if we make mistakes. What matters is trying. As the students began to play, Isabel felt something change inside. She was no longer the same person she had been before the accident, but she had found a new purpose, a new strength. She was reborn, and her story was now at the service of others. Maria watched Isabel from afar, sitting on a bench in the school garden. She had never felt so proud of her daughter as she did at that moment. Her little girl, who one day was almost buried alive, now inspired others to live with courage and hope. When Isabel left the classroom, she found Maria waiting for her with a warm smile. Mom, what are you doing here? I came for you, Maria replied, extending an arm. I wanted to see with my own eyes how much you are shining. The two walked together toward the plaza, talking and laughing. When they reached the bench where they always sat, Maria took her daughter's hand and looked into her eyes. Beautiful. You know how much I love you, right? I know, Mom, and I love you even more. Maria sighed, her eyes shining. I thought I had lost everything when that day happened, but seeing you now, I realize that we never lost anything. The love between us was always stronger than any darkness. Isabel smiled, tilting her head to rest on her mother's shoulder. I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. You never gave up on me, even when I wanted to give up myself. Maria kissed her daughter's forehead and squeezed her hand. I will never give up on you, no matter what happens. The two of them stayed there, watching the sunset together. Maria knew that Isabel's path would still have challenges, but she also knew that as long as they were together, there would be no obstacle they couldn't overcome. And in that moment, as the sky turned golden, the love between them seemed to illuminate everything like a silent promise that there would always be light after darkness. Isabel was sitting in her small studio surrounded by sheet music and notes. Her guitar rested next to the table like a silent companion. In recent months, she had received so much love and support that she felt it was her turn to give something back. That was when she began to write. At first, her words were hesitant. How could she explain what had happened? How could she convey the weight of the silence, the despair of being trapped in her own body, and the pain of almost being forgotten? But as she wrote, she realized that she didn't need to be perfect. She needed to be sincere. Her book, which she called Never Give Up on the Light, was not just an account of her experience. It was a letter to all those who had faced darkness, fear, and doubt. In its pages, Isabel spoke about the strength of her mother's love, Ramon's courage, and how music had become her salvation. There was a passage that summed up her message. Light is not always strong or obvious. Sometimes it is just a spark, something small and almost invisible. But if you believe in it, that spark can become a beacon that guides you back to life. When she finished writing, she felt a mixture of relief and excitement. Maria was the first to read the book. When she finished, tears ran freely down her face. Beautiful this. This is not just your story. It is the story of so many people who need hope. You are going to touch many hearts with this." Isabel smiled shyly, taking her mother's hand. "Mother, if it helps at least one person, it will have been worth it." After it was published, Never Give Up on the Light. It quickly became a success, not because it was technically perfect, but because it was honest. It was a book that spoke directly to the soul. Readers from different places began to send letters to Isabel. Some were letters of thanks. Others were from people sharing their own stories of struggle and overcoming adversity. One of the letters said, "Your story gave me the strength to face my fear. Thank you for reminding me that there is always light, even in the darkest moments." Another came from a mother who was facing grief. "I lost my daughter last year and thought I would never find a reason to live again. But reading your words, I understood that the love we feel for those we have lost never disappears. It is the light that keeps us alive." Isabel read each letter with tears in her eyes, feeling connected to these people in a way she never imagined. An interview for a local radio station, she said, "I never imagined that my pain could be transformed into something so beautiful. This book is not just my story. It is about the power of love, resilience, and the light that exists within each of us." In the community where Isabel lived, she became a symbol of strength and inspiration. People who did not know each other before began to gather to share their stories, their struggles, and their victories. Isabel's story had created something stronger than a simple connection, a network of hope and support. Deep down, Isabel knew that her journey was not yet complete, but as she read the words of gratitude that came to her, she understood something important. The light she had found was not just for her, it was to be shared. And so, each letter, each word of love, and each shared tear became further proof that even in the deepest darkness, there is always a way back to the light. It was a quiet morning when Isabel was sitting on the terrace of her house, feeling the sun warm her skin as she leafed through the letters. Among the letters from readers and admirers, a simple envelope caught her attention. It had no return address, only her name written in firm, discreet handwriting. When she opened the envelope, she found a carefully folded sheet of paper. The soft scent of fresh ink still lingered in the air. As she began to read, she immediately recognized the emotion behind the words. "Dear Ramon, Isabel, I have been thinking about writing this letter for a long time. The words seem to escape me every time I try to organize my thoughts. But today, seeing how your story is touching so many lives, I realized that I had to tell you this. Not only did you save yourself, you also saved me. For a long time, I lived with the guilt of not having been able to save my daughter. The weight of that was unbearable, and I distanced myself from everything and everyone, believing there was no redemption for me. Then you appeared. When I saw you in that room, something inside me changed. It was as if life had given me a second chance, a chance to do what I couldn't do before. But it wasn't just that. It was your strength, your struggle to survive even when the world thought all was lost. That made me realize something greater, that light can be found even in the deepest shadows. Every time I see you play your music, teach your students, or simply smile, I feel that a part of me has healed. You are a living reminder that it is never too late to do the right thing, to start over, to find meaning in pain. That is why I wanted you to know that your story not only changed your life and your mother's, but also mine. And for that, I will be eternally grateful, with admiration and affection." Ramon Isabel finished reading with tears running silently down her face. She held the letter against her chest, feeling a mixture of gratitude and emotion. It was more than words on paper. It was a connection, a circle that was finally closing. She knew how much Ramon had suffered, the weight he had carried for years, and now realizing that her struggle had also helped ease his pain was something she could never do. Maria appeared on the terrace, noticing the tears in Isabel's eyes. "What happened, Isabel?" She handed the letter to her mother, smiling through her tears. "It's from Ramon, Mom. He found peace." Maria read the letter silently, holding her daughter's hand as tears ran down her own face. "You're right, beautiful. You didn't just save yourself, you saved us all. The two sat there side by side as the sun continued to shine. Ramon's letter was more than a message. It was a reminder that pain can be transformed, that love and strength can heal the deepest wounds, and that there is always room for forgiveness and hope. With a serene smile, Isabel looked up at the sky, feeling that her journey had reached a point of balance. There were still challenges ahead, but now she knew she was not alone, and most importantly, she knew that her light had illuminated more lives than she could ever imagine. Years have passed since that magical night when Isabel took the stage and transformed her pain into music. The small town where she grew up had changed, but something remained. Isabel's story continued to inspire everyone who knew her or heard about her. Now Isabel was in her early 30s. Her longer hair had a few silver strands that seemed to shine in the sunlight, like marks of her battles and victories. Her life was full of meaning. She continued to teach music, write books, and share her story in conferences that touched everyone's hearts. One day, Isabel received an unexpected call. The mayor of the town wanted to honor her in a special ceremony, something that would represent all she had achieved and the impact her struggle had had on the community. "Isabel," said the mayor during the call, "you are a symbol of strength and hope. We want your story to remain forever in our memories and inspire future generations." Isabel hesitated, surprised by the proposal. She didn't see herself as a hero, just as someone who had done everything possible to keep on living. But with the support of Maria and Camila, now an adult and a music teacher, she accepted. On the day of the ceremony, the central plaza was full again, as it had been so many times before. But this time, Isabel was not just the woman who played music. She was the woman who never stopped searching for the light. The event began with emotional speeches. Ramon, now retired, was one of the first to speak. "When I think of Isabel's journey, I see the strength of the human spirit in its purest form. She taught us that light can be found even in the deepest darkness, and that music is not just sound, but a way to survive." Ramon's words brought tears to everyone's eyes, including Isabel, who was watching from the front row next to Maria. When it was her turn to speak, the plaza fell completely silent. Isabel slowly helped her up onto the stage, leaning on a cane she had been using since the accident. But with her head held high, she looked at the crowd, now filled with new and familiar faces, and took a deep breath before beginning. "Years ago, I thought my life was over when I was in that coffin. I felt that the world had forgotten me. But thanks to my mother's love, Ramon's courage, and the support of so many people, I discovered that light never abandons us. It may weaken, it may hide, but it is always there, waiting for us to find it again." Isabel paused, looking at Camila in the crowd. "Today I see my story reflected in each of you. We all face our darkness, but together we can create a light that no one can extinguish." When she finished speaking, the crowd burst into applause. It was then that the mayor revealed the final tribute. A sculpture of Isabel was raised in the center of the square, depicting her with a guitar and the inscription, "Isabel, the woman who never stopped searching for the light." Maria took her daughter's hand as they both looked at the statue. "They couldn't have chosen better words," said Maria, moved. Isabel squeezed her mother's hand, sending a wave of gratitude through the crowd. "It was you who never gave up on me, Mom. Without you, I wouldn't be here." That day, as the sun set and the square filled with music played by Isabel's students, she understood that her legacy was not just a statue or a title. Her legacy was in the people, in the lives she touched, and in the music that would resonate for generations. The woman who was almost forgotten, who one day thought her light had gone out, was now remembered as a beacon of hope and courage. And even though time continued to move forward, Isabel's light would never stop shining. Did this story touch you? Let us know in the comments. Would you listen to your heart like Maria, or would you accept what the doctors said? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that will touch your soul. Before you go, there's an incredible video you absolutely must watch on the screen. It's such a touching story that it brought thousands of people to tears and made them rethink what truly matters. Click now and get your tissues ready.